Hi there everyone, and welcome to week 7 where we're talking about setting the agenda in public relations and the media. So today we're going to talk about agenda setting theory, some skills behind agenda setting, and just have a quick talk about some case studies, which is I think a really good way, to look at this area of study. Agenda setting theory, it's an older theory. It comes out of the sort of 70s, where it was grounded in journalism was mass communication. That is one broadcast point to lots of people. And basically its premise is that it doesn't tell us what to think, but it does tell us what to think about. Now, some would argue that it's not so relevant. We think actually that it is still relevant. We know, and research continues to tell us, that the media has an outstanding influence on what we think and talk about. Again, the argument that it doesn't tell us how to think or what to think, is I think arguable, but I'm not going to go into it in this particular course, because what we also know in research is that we read what we agree with. Therefore, if you're conservative, generally you will, align to conservative views and newspapers, and if you're, more radical, then you will actually look at more alternative versions of the press and believe them. So essentially, we tend to believe what we're told in the media. So it does have an influence on how we think about an issue in terms of how it might be framed. So there are many skills in public relations, and the issue here is in terms of what skills are important when you're actually starting to set the agenda. And the first thing that is most important is to understand the communication problem. And in most instances, the communication problem is that people don't know about something, or aren't aware of something, or so you're actually starting to bring something from a 0 point of knowledge to, well, in some cases, saturation point. And how you get that message out is fundamental to setting an agenda, and the media obviously has a role to play. So there are 3 main areas that are useful and have been found successful in getting people to think and talk about an issue or an idea. And one is to appoint a spokesperson, or to identify someone who is a supporter of an idea. Now, most organisations have patrons, and that is a concept behind, having a prominent person behind a particular idea. You also need to be able to identify opportunities, that is, understanding your stakeholders, seeing how you might be able to, say, piggyback onto something else, appreciating what's in the current environment as a topical issue, and knowing whether, in fact, you can piggyback onto that. And to be able to develop key messages that address the communication problem and address the goals and strategies of the campaign. These are the areas, we've been doing this course for a while now, and these are the areas that we think are most useful to try and develop. If you can develop a really good key message that your high-profile spokesperson is happy to promote, and you are able to identify opportunities that will help promote your idea or approach, then that's a really big start. Obviously, there are other skills, developing media content, the ability to actually write or create your own content has always been valuable, increasingly so these days. Corporations have their own websites, social media developers, media developers, media content developers, video makers, and so on, being able to write internal newsletters or engage stakeholders outside of the media space is incredibly important. But we also know that media will link to or promote something, as we've all seen this term in particular with certain examples that we've put up. So, and then the ability to use social media, obviously. If you are a PR officer who has never used social media, doesn't have a Twitter account, all that sort of stuff, then you don't understand, or you're not going to know how people actually possibly engage with an issue. So, and the ability to write, which I don't have written down on my PowerPoint, but that's fundamental. So they're your basic skills. And then just to touch on a couple of case studies that we think are, really good examples of setting agendas. And the first one there is sudden infant death syndrome. So that now is a couple of decades old, that campaign, but when it started in the 1990s, it was it was quite common for women to lose a baby just in sleep. And the impact of that campaign, there has been an 85% decrease in the number of babies who die just overnight for no apparent reason. So, and what we know is that it has been an information campaign that has, gone through nursing communities, parenting communities, and so on. So it started just as a very simple Red Nose Day to create awareness, and has become much more than that as it has progressed. So on the first instance, it was awareness, and then it got embedded in education, and now it's kind of everywhere. The Best Job in the World, that's an integrated marketing campaign that basically the aim of that was to try and set Australia on the agenda of the overseas international market. Now, I'm interested in this one because I think, at the time, the amount of hits and media coverage it got was outstanding. But whether or not it's had any impact on tourism is a really good question. So that's, if you create a campaign to set an agenda, how do you keep it going? And we talk about that next week. So Indigenous land rights, again, that's a few decades old now, and we don't see it in the news now because it's accepted, it's integrated. But at the time, obviously, the ability for Indigenous people to have a say in the land on which they lived or on which other people lived that were that had been taken from them, it was a political campaign, and it's a really interesting case study to have a look at. So I would encourage you to have a look at how it became. It started as in terms of political activism, a little bit like, in a funny sort of way, Coney, and then ended up over a period of time being integrated to the point where it's now, if you work in a large corporation within Australia and you need to access Indigenous land, there are processes around it. It's accepted as part of business and society. And then the other one is the Every Family Needs a Farmer campaign. Now, this was actually devised by AgForce a couple of years ago. The communication problem there was that there was a view that people weren't aware of where their food was coming from. It's been a very successful campaign overall, and thanks to the incorporation of a number of very high-profile sports people, Shane Webke, for example, who is a footballer. So that was an awareness campaign. So all of these are different types of campaigns. They all, however, require media or have used media in some form. So they're all campaigns. They've all got gimmicks, what I would call the light and fluffy stuff, of sudden infant death. SIDS is, you've got your red nose, best job in the world, T-shirts and all sorts of stuff. Indigenous land rights, banners, obviously, a flag that has become synonymous with, the Indigenous flag, but, a whole heap of other stuff. Obviously, a political campaign's not quite so gimmicky as others. Every Family Need a Farmer, it's an awareness campaign. A lot more media content was produced for that one than perhaps the others initially. So I would encourage you to have a look at those simple Google searches, looking at, just type in Every Family Needs a Farmer campaign, success or otherwise. And I would encourage you to look out for these because there's learnings in all of them, and I'm happy to discuss them this week. So in summary, agenda setting theory accepts the role of influencing what we think about. Understanding the communication problem and the key skills to create key messages are critical, and case study analysis is important in reviewing success or otherwise. So over the next few weeks, we're actually looking at maintaining agendas, and then we're looking at reacting agendas, and we will certainly be looking at more case studies as we get into what I call the guts of this course. So have a great week.